Hey guys, tonight we are time traveling back to the 8th century, to the largest, most glamorous, and arguably the most fashionable city in the world, Chang'an, the capital of the Tang Dynasty. Think of it as a historical version of a fashion and try-on haul, but instead of unboxing, you are stepping right into the streets of a global metropolis. A little warning though, the culture shock might be intense, and given the city has sheer size and complex rules, you might not survive the first day without a good guide. Luckily, you have me. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you are at it, let me know in the comments what city you are listening from and what time it is for you. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The dust of the long road finally settles as you stand before the city gates. This isn't just any gate. It's a colossal structure, wide enough for a dozen horse-drawn carts to pass through at once, with towering guard posts that seem to touch the clouds. You've heard stories about Chang'an, of course, a city of 1,000,000 souls, the eastern terminus of the legendary Silk Road, a place where civilization itself felt new and shiny. But the stories did not prepare you for this. You step through the gate, and the world explodes into a kaleidoscope of sound, color, and scent. The main thoroughfare, the Vermilion Bird Avenue, stretches before you, a perfectly straight, impossibly wide boulevard that runs for miles. On either side, the city is carved into a perfect grid of 108 wards, each a miniature walled town in itself. It's a marvel of urban planning, orderly and immense. But the people are anything but orderly. Your eyes widen. You were expecting to see people in the flowing, elegant robes you've always associated with the great Tang Empire. And you do, here and there, but they are almost lost in a sea of what can only be described as foreign, utterly undazzlingly foreign. A caravan of camels, laden with goods and jingling with bronze bells, is led by a man with a high-bridged nose, a thick beard, and a tall, pointed cap. His tunic is tight-fitting, tucked into soft leather boots, nothing like the loose garments you're used to. Then you see her, a young woman, clearly a local of some wealth, trotting by on a magnificent horse. She isn't riding side saddle as a proper lady should. No, she's sitting astride it like a man. And she's wearing, those trousers, a short, belted tunic with a strange lapel that opens at the neck, and sturdy-looking boots. Her hair is piled high in a complex knot, but it's not the familiar style you know. It looks exotic, wild. You stand there for a moment, a little lost, a little stunned. Merchants from Persia, monks from India, dancers from SOG Diana, nobles from Korea and Japan. They all mingled here. Their language is a dizzying babble that mixes with the scent of roasted chestnuts, exotic spices, and horse leather. It feels less like the heart of a Chinese empire and more like the crossroads of the entire world. You see so many locals dressed in these barbarian styles that you start to wonder if you've gotten the memo wrong. Are these all visitors from afar? Or have the people of Chang'an simply decided that foreign is the new black? It's a question that historians still puzzle over today. The exact ratio of actual foreigners to locals who simply adopted their entire aesthetic. One thing is certain, though, the fashion you are witnessing on these streets is telling a story of a culture so confident, so open, that it embraces the outside world and wears it as a badge of honor. As dusk begins to settle, you hear the low, resonant beat of a drum in the distance. It's the city curfew drum, a reminder that behind all this vibrant, chaotic energy lies a deep sense of order. Soon, the gates of all 108 wards will close, and the streets will fall silent. But for now, you just stand and watch, taking it all in. You have a feeling your old wardrobe is going to look very, very out of place here. The drumbeat quickens, a steady, rhythmic pulse that seems to vibrate in your chest. It's a sound of finality. The ward gates are about to be barred for the night. A flicker of panic sets in, the thought of being locked out on the main avenue, a place that will soon be eerily empty and patrolled by the city watch. Your eyes dart around, and you spot an open doorway just ahead. Day 1. Yellow light spills out, illuminating a hanging sign painted with the image of a silk loom. Day clothing shop. Perfect. You slip inside just as the final, resonant boom of the drum echoes through the city, followed by the distant, heavy groan of closing gates. You've made it. The air inside is warm and smells of dyed fabrics, sandalwood incense, and something else, a faint, woolly scent you can't quite place. The shop is small but exquisitely arranged. Bolts of silk in every conceivable color are stacked against one wall, shimmering in the lamplight. On wooden racks hang finished garments, but they are the very same styles you just saw on the street. The short tunics, the curious open collars, the trousers. A woman emerges from a back room, wiping her hands on an apron. Just middle-aged, with sharp, observant eyes and a welcoming smile. She takes in your traditional, slightly dusty robes in a single glance. A new arrival in Chang'an, she asks, her voice smooth and practiced. Don't worry, many look just as you do on their first day, but by the second, they come to me. You gesture vaguely at the clothes around you. I have to ask. You say, feeling a bit foolish, what is this style? I feel as though I've stepped into another country. Her smile widens. Ah, she says, her eyes twinkling with commercial delight. You've noticed our little craze. That is hufu. She says the term with a certain reverence, as if naming a famous poet. Hufu. The characters literally mean barbarian clothing. It's a blunt term, but in the glittering world of Chang'an, it has come to mean something else entirely. Chic, modern, sophisticated. Let me show you, she says, her professional enthusiasm taking over. She plucks a tunic from a nearby rack. This is a classic round-collared robe, but see how we've adapted it. She lays it on a polished wooden table, instead of the wide, flowing sleeves of your own garment. Sleeves that could hide your hands and half a dozen more inches. These are tailored and narrow, ending neatly at the wrist. No more dipping your cuffs in the soup at a banquet, she says with a wink, and no more getting your sleeves tangled in the reins of your horse. She points to the color. It's not the typical crossover style that fastens on the side. This one has a distinct, open lapel, revealing the garment worn underneath. It's a small detail, but it changes the entire silhouette, making it look sharp and purposeful. This is a Persian style, she explains, very popular with the Sojidi and merchants who run the best businesses in the West Market. The Hu people, as we call them, live their lives on the move. Their clothes have to be practical, and what is more fashionable than practicality? This is the central appeal, you realize. Hufu is the Tang Dynasty's version of athleisure. It's clothing designed for an active, cosmopolitan life. For riding horses, for archery, for moving freely through a bustling city without being encumbered by yards of flowing silk. It's a quiet rebellion against the formal, restrictive clothing of the past. You run your hand over the fabric. It's a heavy brocade, woven with a pattern you've never seen before. Pearl roundels enclosing a pair of facing birds. Exquisite, isn't it? The shopkeeper murmurs. The design comes from Sasanian Persia. We call it Yuan. Right now, nothing says I have taste and money quite like a Yuan. It's a strange and fascinating thought that the height of luxury in the capital of China is to look like you've just ridden in from Samarkand. A quirky little fact of the era is that the term "hu" was an incredibly broad, catch-all word for dozens of different ethnic groups from the north and west, lumping a Persian, a Sogdian, and a Turk under the same label was common, and now their diverse aesthetics were being blended into a single, sensational fashion trend. The shopkeeper seems to read your mind. Of course, she says, lowering her voice slightly. The old Confucian scholars in the East Market grumble about it. They say it blurs the lines, that men and women are starting to dress too much alike, that we are losing our traditions. She shrugs. but their wives and daughters are still my best customers. Some historians today argue about how deep this trend really went, whether it was purely an elite phenomenon or if it trickled down to the common folk. From where I stand, I can tell you, everyone wants a piece of it, even if it's just a cheaper cotton version or a small adjustment to their collar to mimic the style. It's the spirit of the age. You look from the exotic tunic on the table to your own familiar robes. You suddenly feel dated, provincial. The shopkeeper watches you, a knowing look on her face. The choice is yours. Stick with tradition, or embrace the vibrant, for an infused pulse of Chang'an. Your gaze is fixed on the hufu tunic. It seems to beckon to you, a silent invitation to shed your old self and step into the rhythm of this electrifying city. The shopkeeper, sensing a potential sale, gestures for you to follow her to a quieter corner of the shop, where a bronze mirror, polished to a surprisingly clear sheen, hangs on the wall. Go on, she encourages. Just feel the difference. She hands you a simple, yet elegant, tunic. It's made of a dark blue linen, sturdy and well dyed, a more everyday version of the silken one. You hesitate for a moment, then slip off your outer robe. The immediate sensation is one of lightness. Your arms, freed from the cavernous sleeves you've worn your whole life, feel suddenly exposed and nimble. You pull the tunic on. It settles over your shoulders with a satisfying snugness. The first thing you notice is the sleeves. They are indeed narrow, tapering down to your wrists and ending in a crisp, embroidered cuff. You raise your arms, swing them around. The freedom of movement is astonishing. It's a feeling you've never associated with clothing before. Clothing was always something you had to manage, to keep clean, to arrange gracefully. This garment feels like it's working with you, not against you. Then, the collar. The shopkeeper steps forward to adjust it. This is a fanling, she says, a fanling or turnover collar, instead of the fabric crossing over your chest and fastening near the shoulder. This one opens down the center, the two sides of the collar folded back to create lapels. It exposes the top of your undergarment and a sliver of your neck and collarbone. It feels daring, a little vulnerable, but also incredibly modern. The design frames your face in a way your old robes never did. It is a design from the western regions, she explains, her fingers expertly straightening the fabric. It lets the air circulate. Very clever for a long journey on horseback. Here in Chang'an, it's just, and look, and what a look it is. It lends the wearer an air of purpose, of readiness. People in these clothes don't look like they spend their days composing poetry in a quiet garden. They look like they run things. You look at your reflection. The tunic is cut straight and falls to about your mid-thigh. It's meant to be worn with trousers and a belt. The whole ensemble is a world away from the floor-length, multi-layered Han-style robes you're accustomed to. This is clothing stripped down to its essentials, every element serving a function. A subtle but important detail that often gets lost in modern reproductions is the sheer variety within the hufu category. While the tight sleeves and lapels were hallmarks, there were dozens of regional variations. Some had embroidery along the seams, others were made of wool or even leather. A little-known fact is that some of these tunics incorporated unique weaving techniques, like the soji di and ichi silk, which was so prized that fragments have been found in tombs thousands of miles away. The specific cut of your lapel or the pattern of your cuff could signal a familiarity with a specific part of the Silk Road. The shopkeeper seems pleased with your reaction. You see, it makes you stand taller. No. She taps the open collar. Scholars are still debating exactly where the fanling first came from. Some say it was a Turkic influence. Others argue for a stronger Persian root. They write long scrolls about it. I hear. All I know is that it's ours. You can't help but smile. It's true. You do feel different. More capable. It is as if the tunic has changed your posture, imbued you with a bit of the restless, adventurous spirit of the merchants and soldiers who brought the style to Chang'an. It's the power of fashion in its purest form, not just to cover the body, but to transform the wearer's perception of themselves. Most people start with a tunic, the shopkeeper says, already moving to a display of belts. But once you've felt this freedom, you'll be back. You'll want the trousers, then the boots, then maybe a new hairstyle to match. She's not just selling clothes, she's selling an identity, a complete package of Chang'an cool. You look in the mirror again, turning this way and that. The tunic is a simple piece of clothing, but it represents a profound cultural shift. It's a symbol of an empire at the peak of its confidence, so secure in its own identity that it can borrow from others not as a sign of weakness, but as a mark of its cosmopolitan power. It's a quiet revolution, happening not in a palace or on a battlefield, but right here, in a small clothing shop, in the simple act of trying on a new shirt. You haven't even stepped back out onto the street yet, and Chang'an is already changing you. You decide to buy the blue tunic. It feels like a necessary first step, a passport into the city's vibrant social landscape. As you're repaying the shopkeeper, the conversation naturally drifts back to the fashion you saw on the street. The most surprising thing for me, you admit, was seeing the women on horseback, in trousers. The shopkeeper chuckles. Down to out your change. Yes, the women of Chang'an, they are a force of nature, are they not? They don't just follow the trends, they lead them. She gestures toward the door, which now has its heavy wooden bar in place for the night. If you think seeing a woman in trousers is shocking, you should see them on the polo field. This is a concept so alien it takes you a moment to process. You've always understood clothing to be a primary marker of gender. Men wore robes and trousers. Women wore layered blouses and long, flowing skirts. The idea of a woman voluntarily putting on trousers was not just unconventional. It was a subversion of the natural order. But here in Chang'an, it's apparently just another Tuesday. It started with the palace ladies. The shopkeeper explains, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. The court is full of music, dancing, and sports from the western regions. The imperial princesses and their attendants started wearing hufu for convenience when they went riding or played cuju, a type of ancient football. When you need to move, a long silk skirt is your worst enemy, so they adopted the men's trousers and boots. Then once the most high-status women in the empire started doing it, well, she leaves the sentence unfinished. But the implication is clear. Everyone else followed suit. You try to picture it. A noble lady, someone who would traditionally be sequestered in the inner courtyards of a mansion, now dressed in a smart tunic, trousers, and boots, her hair tied up practically, swinging herself onto a horse with the ease of a cavalryman. It's a powerful image of liberation. She is no longer a delicate flower to be sheltered. She is a participant, an actor on the city's grand stage. The shopkeeper leads you to another section of the store. Here, the women's garments are displayed. Then they are, to your astonishment, nearly identical to the men's. They are the same round-collared tunics, the same narrow sleeves, but they're also beautifully tailored trousers, some made of patterned silk, others of sturdy cotton. Next to them are displays of women's boots, smaller and slightly more decorated than the men's, but just as practical. Of course, they don't wear this all the time. She clarifies, for formal ceremonies, they will still wear the traditional chest-high gowns, the beautiful Keizhong Rukyu Yuan. But for everyday life, for a trip to the market, a visit to a temple, or a ride out to the countryside, this is what the fashionable woman wears. This practical fashion choice had an unintended side effect, a little-known tidbit of social history. The adoption of trousers and boots by women made them far more mobile and independent. It became easier for them to travel, to engage in business, and to be seen in public spaces previously dominated by men. The fashion trend was, in essence, a catalyst for a subtle but significant shift in women's public roles. You touch a pair of soft, embroidered trousers. The freedom they represent is almost tangible. This was just about comfort. It was a statement. A woman in HUFU was signaling that she was worldly, active, and unafraid to blur the lines. This is a topic that still fascinates historians. Was this a true feminist movement, or was it merely a fleeting fad of the elite? The scholarly consensus leans towards the latter, but it's hard to deny that for a few generations, women in cities like Chang'an and Luoring experienced a level of personal freedom that their predecessors, and indeed their successors, could only dream of. The most daring ones. The shopkeeper adds, don't even bother with the women's version. They wear the men's robes directly. They're a bit shorter, a bit looser. It's a very powerful look. This trend of women wearing men's clothing became so pronounced that it was occasionally remarked upon by court officials, sometimes with admiration for its boldness, other times with consternation. As you fold your new tunic, you realize the HUFU phenomenon is far more complex than you initially thought. It's not just about exoticist, it's about practicality, social status, and a profound redefinition of gender roles, all woven into the fabric of a single outfit. The women of Chang'an didn't just borrow a fashion from foreign men. They adapted it, made it their own, and used it to carve out a new space for themselves in a rapidly changing world. Leaving the shop, you know that when you step out into the daylight tomorrow, you'll see the city as women in a completely new light, not as shocking anomalies, but as the true trendsetters of a golden age. The next morning, the ward gates grind open at the first light of dawn, and the city roars back to life. Wearing your new blue tunic, you feel a little less like an outsider and a little more like a participant. You decide to find a place for breakfast, and a tantalizing aroma of sesame and roasted meat leads you to a bustling corner tea house. It's crowded, filled with a mix of people all starting their day. You find a small table and order a bowl of millet kami and a piece of huping, a type of flatbread baked with sesame seeds, its name literally meaning barbarian pancake. Even the food here, you muse, is part of the trend. The tea house is the perfect place to eavesdrop. It's a microcosm of the city, and the chatter around you is a river of information. At a nearby table, two men who look like mid-level government clerks are complaining about their workload. At another, a group of merchants are haggling over the price of saffron. Their conversation a mix of GDI and unhalting Chinese. It is here, amidst the steam and the noise, that you begin to piece together the why behind the HUFU craze. You overhear one of the merchants, a man with a weathered face and a magnificent turquoise ring, explaining something to a younger, local man. It's the horses, he says, gesturing with his cup. Everything in this city comes back to the horses. The emperor loves them. The generals need them. The nobles race them. And you can try to prop a horse in those big, floppy robes. It's dangerous. It's foolish. H.E.S. right. The Tang Dynasty was built on the strength of its cavalry. The empire's military power and its ability to control the vast territories of the Silk Road depended on a constant supply of strong Central Asian horses. This created a powerful equestrian culture that permeated every level of society, especially among the elite. The imperial family were famously enthusiastic horsemen. Emperor Xuanzong, the reigning monarch, was known for his passion for polo and hunting. His favorite concubine, Yang Jiyuifei, was often depicted on horseback. This imperial endorsement was the ultimate fashion statement. If the emperor and his court dressed for the saddle, then dressing for the saddle was the very definition of power and prestige. Another man at the table, a local artisan by the looks of him, chimes in. It's more than just horses. It's about being worldly. My biggest clients, they don't want the same old dragons and phoenixes. They want the new patterns, the ones that come from the West. They ask me, does this look like something from Persia? Having a piece of the exotic, it shows you're connected. It shows you're not just some provincial landowner. This reveals another layer of the phenomenon. In an empire as vast and diverse as the Tang, cosmopolitanism was a form of cultural capital. To dress in HUFU was to signal that you were part of the global conversation. It suggested you were familiar with the wider world, that you might have business dealings with exotic foreigners, or that you were at least sophisticated enough to appreciate their aesthetics. It was the ancient equivalent of carrying a designer handbag from Milan or wearing a watch from Switzerland. It told a story about who you were and what you valued. Of course, not everyone was a fan. A quirky, little-known aspect of this period is the existence of fashion police of a sort. There were conservative Confucian scholars and censors at court who would periodically write memorials to the emperor, complaining about the decadence of hufu. They lamented that the proper rituals and distinctions between classes, genders, and even between Chinese and foreigners were being eroded by these clothing choices. One famous edict was actually passed in an attempt to ban certain forms of hufu, but it was, by all accounts, completely ignored by the public. The trend was simply too powerful to be stopped by a few grumpy officials. The debate among historians continues to this day. Was the adoption of hufu a sign of cultural strength, an empire so confident it could absorb anything, or was it a symptom of cultural dilution, a turning away from native traditions? The answer is likely somewhere in between. It was a complex social phenomenon driven by a confluence of factors: military pragmatism, imperial prestige, economic ambition, and a genuine curiosity and appreciation for the arts of other cultures. As you finish your hooping, a group of young men and women enter the tea house. They are loud, laughing, and dressed head to toe in the most vibrant hufu seen yet. Brightly colored tunics, intricate belts, and tall leather boots that click smartly on the wooden floor. They carry themselves with an air of unshakable confidence. They are the youth of Chang'an, the inheritors of this golden age, and they are wearing their worldview for all to see. The reasons for this fashion are complex, but the result is simple. It made the people of Chang'an look and feel like they were at the center of the universe. Feeling energized by the breakfast and the buzz of the tea house, you decide to head straight to the source of all this exotic energy, the West Market, your new friend. The shopkeeper, I've mentioned it, has had the merchants, while Chang'an has the major markets, the East and the West. You've heard the East Market is for the domestic high-end goods, the hunt of the local aristocracy. But the West Market is the city's wild, beating heart, the true terminus of the Silk Road. Getting there is an adventure in itself. You navigate the grid-like streets, constantly amazed by their scale. Each of the 108 wards is a self-contained community, and to get to the market, you must pass through several of them. As you walk west, you notice a subtle shift in the population. The faces become more diverse, the languages you overhear more varied. You're entering the domain of the Huron, the foreign merchants who lived and worked in this part of the city. Finally, you arrive. The entrance to the West Market isn't just a gate, it's a vortex. The sheer density of people, animals, and goods is overwhelming. The market itself is enormous, covering the area of 2 entire wards and crisscrossed by 4 major streets. The signs above the shops are written not just in Chinese characters, but in various scripts you don't recognize. So GDIN, perhaps, or Tuchar-ian. The air is thick with a heady perfume of spices you can't name, the sizzle of street food, the cries of vendors, the braying of donkeys, and the low groans of camels. You dive into one of the smaller alleyways, letting the current of the crowd carry you. It's a treasure trove. A Persian man with a magnificent silver beard presides over a stall piled high with gleaming metal. Silver ewers, gilded plates, and bronze mirrors inlaid with turquoise. Next to him, a group of Uyghur men are selling horses, their powerful steeds stamping impatiently. Further down, you find a shop selling nothing but glass. In an empire where ceramics reigns supreme, this translucent, jewel-toned glassware, imported from Sasanian Persia or even the Roman world, is the height of exotic luxury. You see delicate bowls, long-necked bottles, and beads of 1,000 colors. This is where the hufu fashion finds its raw materials. You pass stalls overflowing with bolts of foreign textiles. There are heavy wools from the northern steppes, fine linens from Central Asia, and cotton, a relatively new and prized commodity, in various weaves and prints. The patterns are a riot of non-Chinese motifs, diameter shapes, stylized animals in profile, and the ubiquitous pearl roundels enclosing everything from ducks to winged horses. These are the fabrics that the tailors of Chang'an would purchase to create their fashionable garments. One of the more peculiar and little-known imports you might find here is asbestos cloth. Merchants from the western regions would sometimes demonstrate its magical properties by throwing a piece of it into a fire. It would glow red-hot but emerge from the flames completely unharmed and pristinely white. It was seen as a marvelous curiosity, a cloth that could be cleansed by fire, and was incredibly expensive, owned only by the wealthiest nobles or the emperor himself. You pause at a stall that seems to be the epicenter of a small crowd. The vendor, a fast-talking Sojidin, is holding up a small, ornate knife, but it's not the knife that's drawing attention. It's the chain of other small, useful objects hanging from his belt. This is where you see the accessories that complete the hufu look. It's not just about the clothes, but the whole ecosystem of practical items worn on the body. Historians debate the exact degree of segregation in China. While certain wards were known for their large populations, like the one you're in, the West Market was a true melting pot where everyone came to trade. The question remains, how much did these communities truly integrate? Did the Sojidin merchant invite his Chinese neighbor for dinner? The evidence is sparse, but here in the market, at least, the lines seem to blur completely in the shared pursuit of commerce and novelty. Wandering deeper into the market, you find entire sections dedicated to specific trades. There's a street of instrument makers, where you can hear the plaintive notes of a flute or the twang of a lute. There's an area for apothecaries, their shops filled with dried herbs, rare minerals, and fragrant balms from distant lands. And everywhere, there are food stalls selling delicacies you've never dreamed of. Sweet pastries made with grape syrup, roasted lamb on skewers, and strong, fermented mare's milk sold by nomadic-looking men. The West Market is more than just a place to shop. It's a living museum of the world. Every item for sale has a story, a long journey behind it. It's a sensory overload, a dizzying, exhilarating confirmation of everything you've heard about Chang'an's global connections. To walk these streets is to understand, on a visceral level, why a young person living here would want to dress like a foreigner. It was just imitation. It was aspiration. It was a way of physically cloaking oneself in the excitement, the worldliness, and the endless possibility that flowed through this incredible market. Your journey through the West Market has left your head spinning with sights and sounds. You've seen so much, but you feel a nagging urge to take a piece of this world with you. Not just the tunic, but something more tangible. Something that speaks of the market's rugged, practical spirit. Your eyes drift downwards, to the feet of the people hurrying past. You notice the footwear. While some wear simple cloth slippers, the truly fashionable, the people in hufu, are all wearing boots. The boots are as varied as the people themselves. Some are soft, almost like thick socks, made of felt or deerskin. Others are sturdy, black leather creations that come up to the calf. They all share a common characteristic. They are built for action. They are the footwear of riders, travelers, and workers, a stark contrast to the delicate, embroidered silk shoes often favored by the sedentary elite. You decide that a pair of hufu boots will be your next purchase. You ask a friendly vendor for directions, and he points you down a narrow lane dedicated to leather workers. The smell of cured hides hangs heavy in the air. Here, shops display an array of leather goods, saddles, harnesses, quivers for arrows, and, of course, boots. You enter a shop that seems to have the best selection, its entrance flanked by two impressive pairs of knee-high cavalry boots. Inside, a master craftsman is hunched over a low bench, skillfully stitching a sole onto a nearly finished boot. He looks up as you enter, his eyes assessing your size with a glance. He doesn't say much, simply gestures to the rows of boots lining the shelves. For walking, or for riding, he grunts. It's a crucial question. The boots for walking are generally softer, with more flexible soles, designed for navigating the city's paved and underpaved streets. The riding boots are tougher, with a reinforced heel and a stiffer construction to protect the leg and provide a better grip in the stirrups. The stirrup, itself a revolutionary piece of technology that had become widespread in China a few centuries earlier, made cavalry more effective and riding more accessible, further fueling the equestrian culture that made these boots so popular. You opt for a pair of walking boots, something practical for your explorations. The craftsman pulls a pair from the shelf. They are made of a dark brown, oiled leather and reach up to your mid-calf. They are surprisingly light. You sit on a small stool and try them on. The feeling is transformative. Your feet, accustomed to soft slippers, are now encased in a protective, supportive shell. You stand up and walk a few steps. There's a solid, reassuring thump with each footfall. It makes you feel grounded, capable. As the craftsman wraps up your purchase, you notice a small, curious detail on some of the more elaborate boots on display. Tiny bells. A little-known fact is that some aristocratic dandies would have tiny bells attached to their clothing or boots, so they would jingle as they walked, announcing their presence. It was a subtle, and probably slightly annoying, form of auditory swagger. These boots, the craftsman says, breaking his silence as he hands you the wrapped package. They are a good choice. They will last longer than all those silk robes. There's a pride in his voice, the pride of an artisan whose work is based on durability and function rather than fleeting fashion. Yet, ironically, his functional creations have become the height of fashion. The adoption of boots was one of the most significant elements of the hufu trend. For women, in particular, wearing boots was a radical departure from the norm. Traditional Chinese women's footwear was often tiny, delicate, and designed to encourage a small, mincing step. Boots were the opposite. They allowed for a long, confident stride. A woman in boots could keep pace with a man, step over puddles, and navigate the crowded streets without a second thought. Like trousers, boots were a tool of liberation. Historians still debate the specific origins of the most common Tang boot styles. Were they based on Turkic models, Chang'an, or something else entirely? The truth is likely a blend. The various peoples of the Silk Road had been perfecting boot technology for centuries, adapting it to their specific climates and needs. Chang'an became a great repository of all this knowledge, and its craftsmen, like the one in this shop, synthesized these different traditions into a new, distinctly Tang style of boot. Clutching your new purchase, you step back out into the main thoroughfare of the market. You feel more complete now. The tunic gave you the look, but the boots give you the feeling. You feel ready to walk for miles, to explore every corner of this magnificent city. You look at the crowd with new eyes. You are no longer just an observer of the hufu trend. You are now a part of it. From your open-collared tunic right down to your tough, leather-soled feet, your transformation is gaining momentum. With your new boots slung over your shoulder, you continue your walk, feeling increasingly assimilated into the city as aesthetic. As you meander back toward the residential wards, you see a sight that makes you stop in your tracks. It's a group of young women, probably the daughters of wealthy officials or merchants, out for a stroll. They are all dressed in hufu, but with a particular twist that you hadn't fully appreciated until now. One of them, clearly the leader of the group, is not just wearing a female-adapted version of the foreign style. She is wearing, quite unambiguously, men's clothing. She has on a round-colored robe, the Yuan Ling Kao, which was the standard official and formal wear for Tang men. It's cut a bit large for her, the shoulders broad, the length ending just below her knees. It's belted at the waist, and she wears it over trousers and a pair of high-stepping black boots. Her hair is not elaborately coiffed but pulled back simply, and she carries a riding crop, which she taps idly against her leg as she laughs with her friends. She looks bold, audacious, and completely in command. This is the pinnacle of the hufu craze, the point where it transcends mere fashion and becomes a powerful statement about identity. This is the Mundane and Chang'an trend. Women dressing as men. It wasn't about deception. No one was trying to pass as a man. It was about appropriation. These women were deliberately adopting the public uniform of male power and status and claiming it for their own. You watched them, fascinated. This trend was most prominent among aristocratic women who had the social standing to defy convention. They would wear men's robes to go riding, to play polo, and even just to visit friends. It was the ultimate expression of the freedom and confidence that characterized the High Tang period. Wall paintings from the tombs of princesses from this era famously depict them in this exact attire, providing undeniable proof of the practice. A quirky detail about this trend is how specific it was. Women didn't just wear any men's clothes. They specifically wore the round-collared robe, the garment associated with scholars, officials, and the emperor himself. They weren't dressing as laborers or farmers. They were dressing as the ruling class. It was a very pointed and deliberate choice, a way of visually aligning themselves with power in public life. You follow the group at a discreet distance, curious to see how people react. And the answer is, they don't. A few older, more conservative-looking gentlemen give them a passing frown, but most people don't even bat an eye. A street vendor selling sweet pears even calls out a cheerful greeting to them. In the cosmopolitan bubble of Chang'an, this shocking subversion of gender norms has become normalized, at least for a time. This phenomenon has, of course, been the subject of much academic discussion. Some scholars argue it was a reflection of the relatively high status of women in the Tang Dynasty, particularly among the mixed Sino-Turkic aristocracy of the north, who were less bound by traditional Han Chinese patriarchal norms. Others see it as a form of elite decadence, a fad that was more about shocking people and displaying wealth than any real desire for gender equality. The truth, as always, is probably a complex mix of both. What is certain is that for a brief, shining moment in Chinese history, the boundaries of gender expression became remarkably fluid. As the women turn a corner, their laughter fading, you are left with a profound sense of the era's boldness. The hufu style wasn't just about narrow sleeves and boots. It was about a mindset. It was about questioning established norms, burrowing what worked, and fearlessly forging a new identity. The woman in the man's robe was the living embodiment of this spirit. She was taking the most visible symbol of male authority and wearing it with a casual, almost nonchalant air, as if to say, "This belongs to me too." It makes your own simple tunic and impending boot purchase feel almost tame by comparison. You've dipped your toe into the waters of Chang'an fashion, but these women were diving in head first. They weren't just following a trend. They were pushing it to its logical, and most radical, conclusion. You realize that to truly understand the style of this city, you have to look beyond the garments themselves and see the audacious attitudes of the people who wore them. Your sartorial education is progressing rapidly. You have the tunic. You have the boots. You're starting to feel the part. But as you observe the fashionable citizens of Chang'an, you realize there's a crucial element you're missing. It's the final touch, the piece that frames the entire look. What's happening on their heads? The hairstyles and headwear are just as exotic and varied as the clothing. You find a spot on a bench near a picturesque canal that runs through one of the wards. A perfect place for people watching. The traditional hairstyles you're used to. Simple buns for men, more elaborate but still relatively constrained styles for women, are present, but they are overshadowed by a dizzying array of foreign-inspired coiffures. Many of the women wearing hufu have abandoned the complex, multi-layered wigs and ornamental hairpins of traditional court fashion. Instead, their hair is swept up high, often in a single, towering knot or a loop that leans precariously to one side. These are the hufu, or barbarian hairstyles. They are simpler in construction but far more dramatic in silhouette. One popular style you see is the Uyghur-style bun, where the hair is piled high on the head, looking almost like a second, smaller head. It's a look that requires a long, strong neck and a great deal of confidence to pull off. These styles weren't just about aesthetics. They were, like the rest of hufu, practical. They kept the hair out of the face, perfect for an active woman on horseback. They were also less time-consuming to create than the traditional styles, which could involve hours of preparation. This practicality was a key part of their appeal. Then there is the matter of headwear. You see a woman ride past, her face partially obscured by a huimo. This is a wide-brimmed hat with a piece of gauze or silk attached, which hangs down to the shoulders, creating a translucent veil. It's a chic and mysterious look, providing protection from the sun and dust while adding an element of allure. It evolved from an earlier, more concealing piece of headwear called the mili, which was a full-body veil. The transition from the all-covering mili to the face-revealing huimo is seen by historians as a sign of women's increasing confidence in public presence. A particularly fun and little-known piece of headwear from the period was the curtained hat, which was essentially a wide-brimmed hat with a full fabric curtain that could be drawn. What makes it quirky is that these were initially men's military headwear from the northern frontiers, designed to protect against wind and sand. Somehow, they were adopted by the ladies of Chang'an as a fashion accessory. Imagine wearing a piece of tactical gear to a garden party. That's the modern equivalent. Men's headwear is equally distinctive. Instead of the formal caps of Han officials, you see many men wearing what's called a fujiou. It's a type of soft, black cloth head wrap, but over time it evolved to have stiff feet or wings that stuck out from the sides or the back. The shape and angle of these feet became a subtle indicator of status and profession. Some historians are still trying to map the precise semiotics of fujiou feet, a debate that is perhaps as niche as it sounds. More casually, many men who have adopted the hufu look wear soft caps, pointed hats, or turbans, all direct imports from the West. A simple piece of cloth wrapped skillfully around the head can completely change a person's look, marking them as a man of the world, someone familiar with the customs of the Silk Road. You lean back on the bench and try to absorb it all. The clothing, the boots, the hairstyles, the hats, they are all part of a cohesive system of meaning. A woman with a towering yugurban, wearing a man's robe and leather boots, is communicating a very specific identity. She is modern, she is active, she is bold, and she is a product of the unique cultural melting pot of Chang'an. It dawns on you that you can't just adopt one part of the look. To truly fit in, you do need the whole package. Your own simple, traditional hairstyle suddenly feels plain, unimaginative. You watch a young woman adjust her huimo, the silk veil fluttering in the breeze. It's elegant, practical, and exotic all at once. The fashion of this city isn't just worn, it's performed, from head to toe, and the stage is the street itself. Your fashion reconnaissance is nearly complete. You've analyzed the tunics, the trousers, the boots, and the headwear. You feel you have a solid grasp of the hufu silhouette. But as your eyes become more trained, you start to notice another detail, something that at first seemed minor, but now reveals itself as a crucial component of the entire ensemble. It's the belt. This isn't just a simple strip of leather or cloth to hold up one's trousers. The belts worn with hufu are elaborate, functional, and deeply symbolic. You focus on a man walking ahead of you, a government official by the looks of his retinue. His belted tunic is cinched at the waist by a stunning piece of craftsmanship. It's a leather belt, but it's adorned with a series of square plaques made of jade or some other precious stone, and hanging from it are several short leather straps, each ending in a functional object. This is the dai, a type of belt that was one of the most iconic accessories of the Tang Dynasty. Its name is a bit of a mystery, likely a transliteration of a foreign word, and its origins are traced back to the nomadic peoples of the northern steppes. For a rider who spent most of his life on horseback, having essential tools at his fingertips was a matter of survival. The dai was, in essence, the original multi-tool belt. You try to get a closer look. From the man's belt hang a small knife, a whetstone for sharpening it, a pouch for carrying personal items, a flint and steel for making fire, and even a case for chopsticks. It's an entire kit for daily life, all conveniently located at the waist, for soldiers and travelers. This was a brilliant piece of practical design for the fashionable residents of Chang'an. It was a symbol of that same rugged self-sufficiency. Even women adopted them. You see a woman who is dismounted from her horse, handing the reins to a servant. She too wears a Dynasty die, though hers is more delicate. The plaques are made of chased silver, and from it hang not a knife and flint, but a small, embroidered pouch for cosmetics, a tiny silver perfume pomander, and a pair of decorative scissors. It was adapted for a more refined urban life, but the essential form and function remain. One of the more unusual and little-known items that people would hang from their Dynasty was a fish tally. Usually, these were small, fish-shaped tokens, usually made of metal or wood, that were issued to officials. They were split into two halves. The official carried one, and the other was kept at his home office or the palace. They served as a form of identification and proof of authority. Seeing a man with a fish tally hanging from his belt was a clear sign that he was a government employee of some standing. The materials used for the belt plaques were a direct reflection of a person's rank and wealth. The imperial regulations were very specific about this. Only the highest-ranking officials and members of the royal family could wear belts with plaques of jade and gold. Lesser officials were restricted to rhinoceros horn, silver, or bronze, all the way down to simple iron or wood for the common man. The belt became a walking, wearable resume, instantly signaling one's place in the rigid social hierarchy. The academic debate around the Dynasty often centers on its precise path of transmission. Did it come to China with the Turkic peoples, the Xiongbi, or another group? Tracing its evolution is a complex task for archaeologists and historians, as belt plaques are some of the most common finds in tombs from this period across a vast swath of Asia. Each new discovery helps to piece together the puzzle of its journey. You start noticing the belts everywhere. A soldier on patrol has a sturdy leather one with iron fittings. A rich merchant boasts one with polished agate stones. Even a common laborer has a simple cloth version with a small knife hanging from it. It's a unifying element, worn by almost everyone who has adopted the hufu style. The belt cinches the whole look together, literally and figuratively. It gives the loose tunic a sharp waistline, creating a more dynamic and powerful silhouette than the flowing, unbelted robes of traditional Han clothing. It is the final piece of the puzzle you were missing. The hufu look isn't just about individual garments. It's a complete system. The narrow sleeves for movement, the boots for walking and riding, the headwear for practicality, and the belt to carry the tools of life. It's a head-to-toe expression of a new, active, and worldly ideal. You make a mental note. If you're going to survive and thrive in Trendiest, you're going to need a better belt. Your mission for the day becomes clear. You need to see the finest textiles the city has to offer. The clothes are one thing, but the fabric they are made from is the true foundation of their beauty and status. Following the advice you overheard in the tea house, you made your way to a high-end silk shop in the East Market, the more exclusive and aristocratic of the city's two great commercial centers. The atmosphere here is immediately different from the chaotic energy of the West Market. It's calmer, more stately. The clientele is dressed in expensive, fashionable garments, and they move with an air of quiet confidence. You enter a shop whose entrance is marked by a simple but elegant lacquered sign. Inside, the air is cool and silent. Bolts of silk are not piled high, but displayed like precious artworks on individual stands. The shopkeeper is a man of refined manners who gives you a polite, appraising nod. You express your interest in the newest patterns, and he smiles knowingly. He leads you to a special section at the back of the shop. These are the styles favored by the court and the great families, he says in a low voice. He unfurls a bolt of silk, and the sight makes you catch your breath. The fabric is a heavy, lustrous damask, but it's the pattern woven into it that is so striking. It's a design of repeating, beaded circles, pearl randles, and inside each circle is a pair of ducks, facing each other, with ribbons fluttering from their beaks. It's the very pattern the first shopkeeper had called Lianzhuwen, but seeing it up close, in such exquisite quality, is another experience entirely. This is the Sasanian style, the shopkeeper explains, tracing the outline of a roundel with his finger. It comes to us from Persia, through the Sogdian merchants. For the past few decades, nothing has been more sought after. The design is mesmerizing. It's geometric, symmetrical, and completely different from traditional Chinese motifs like swirling dragons, delicate flowers, or scenic landscapes. This art is bold, graphic, and abstract. The animals inside the roundels are often stylized and depicted in profile, another hallmark of Persian art. You see other examples on display. Roundels containing winged horses, stags, boars, and even roosters. The popularity of these patterns speaks volumes about the Tang elite's aesthetic tastes. They were actively choosing to decorate their most expensive possessions, their silk robes, with patterns that were unmistakably foreign. It was a conscious rejection of older, more familiar styles in favor of something new, exciting, and international. Wearing a robe made of this fabric was like wearing a piece of modern art. It signaled that you were at the cutting edge of taste. A little-known and fascinating aspect of these textiles is the weaver's signature that is sometimes found in some fragments of Sasanian-style silks. Weavers in Central Asia or even in China would attempt to copy the Pahlavi script, the language of Sasanian Persia, as part of the design, often without actually knowing what the letters meant. They became decorative elements in themselves, a further sign of the fabric's exotic prestige. It's the ancient equivalent of a t-shirt with a nonsensical English phrase on it, worn purely for its foreign vibe. Of course, the shopkeeper continues, our own weavers here in China have perfected the technique. Some say our domestic versions are now even finer than the originals. This touches on a point of historical debate. How much of this Sasanian silk was directly imported, and how much was produced in Chinese workshops, either by local weavers or by immigrants, Sogdian artisans? The evidence suggests a combination of both. Major silk production centers in China, like in Sichuan province, began creating their own versions of these popular patterns to meet the insatiable demand from the capital. He shows you another bolt, this one with the pattern of hunters on horseback, chasing lions with bows and arrows. The royal hunt was a classic theme in Persian art, symbolizing power and virility. For a Tang nobleman who loved to hunt, a robe with this pattern was the perfect way to express his identity and passions. As you stand there, surrounded by these magnificent textiles, you understand that the hufu trend was just a change in the cut of clothing. It was a complete aesthetic revolution that went right down to the threads themselves. The very visual language of the era was being rewritten, infused with foreign grammar and vocabulary. The dragons and phoenixes of old hadn't disappeared, but they now had to share the stage with the pro-roundels and winged horses of Persia. You leave the shop empty-handed. The prices are far beyond your reach, but your mind is full. You now see the city's fashionable crowd in even sharper focus. Their choice of a tunic with narrow sleeves was a practical one, but their choice to have it made from a fabric woven with Persian-style roosters inside beaded circles was a statement of pure, unadulterated taste. It was the ultimate insider signal, a quiet, luxurious whisper that you were part of the global elite. Your immersion in Chang'an's fashion scene has so far been focused on the streets and the shops. But tonight, you've managed to secure an invitation to something special. A banquet at the mansion of a wealthy merchant. This is your chance to see hufu in its element. Not as everyday wear, but as evening attire, in a setting of music, dance, and celebration. You arrive at the mansion, a sprawling complex of courtyards and halls. The air is filled with the sound of lutes and pipes, and the scent of expensive incense on roasting meats. The host, a man who made his fortune in the silk trade, greets his guests warmly. He is, of course, dressed in a magnificent hufu robe of deep purple silk, adorned with the very Sasanian roundels you saw earlier. As you are led into the main hall, you see that the foreign influence extends far beyond the clothing. The low tables are laden with food served on silver platters of a distinctly Western Asian style. The wine, you learn, is not the traditional Chinese rice wine, but grape wine, a coveted import from the western regions. Even the cushions people are sitting on are covered in thick, patterned wool carpets rather than smooth silk. The entertainment for the evening begins. A troupe of musicians sits on a low platform, playing a melody that is energetic and swirling, completely different from the slow, stately music of the traditional Chinese court. Then, the dancer appears. She is a young woman, said to be from Diana, the region around modern-day Samarkand, which was famous for its incredible performers, and she is here to perform the Hujuan Wu, the Dian whirl. The music quickens, and she begins to spin. It's an incredible display of athleticism and grace. She whirls faster and faster, a human top, her feet seeming to barely touch the small circular rug she dances upon, and her costume is essential to the performance. She is wearing what is perhaps the most extreme form of hufu. It's a dress that is shockingly tight-fitting, a vibrant green, with long, narrow sleeves. It clings to her torso, revealing the outlines of her body in a way that would be unthinkable in traditional Chinese dress. Her waist is cinched with a wide, metallic belt, and her soft boots allow for the rapid, complex footwork. As she spins, her thin, colorful silk scarves fly out around her, creating a mesmerizing blur of color. The audience is captivated, clapping along to the rhythm. This is the entertainment that the Tang elite crave. It was dynamic, thrilling, and exotic. The Dian whirl was so popular that it was performed everywhere. From the imperial court to common taverns, the poet Bai Yi famously wrote about it, describing the dancers spinning tirelessly, like 1,000 wheels. This is where the logic of the tight-fitting hufu becomes undeniable. The style was just for riding horses. It was for dancing, for moving, for showcasing the human form in motion. The flowing sleeves and concealing layers of traditional Han clothing were designed for serene, graceful gestures. This new clothing was for a new kind of energy, one that was fast, vibrant, and alive. A curious and little-known fact about these Dian dancers is that they were often slaves or indentured servants, bought and sold for their artistic talents. They were simultaneously admired for their beauty and skill, and looked down upon for their low social status. They were living, breathing luxury goods, a testament to the wealth and far-reaching connections of their owners. The performance ends in a final, dizzying spin, and the hall erupts in applause. As the dancer catches her breath, you reflect on what you've just seen. The aesthetics of the dance and the clothing are one and the same. Both celebrate a kind of kinetic energy, a physical dynamism that was sweeping through Tang society. Historians often debate the extent of the moral panic that such performances and clothing styles may have caused, while conservative scholars did write disapprovingly of the indecent nature of the tight clothes and suggestive dances. The overwhelming archaeological and textual evidence shows that this was a minority view. For most of the elite in Chang'an, this was not decadence, it was culture. It was sophistication. The rest of the evening passes in a haze of good food, exotic music, and lively conversation. You see now that hufu was not a single, monolithic style. It was a spectrum. It ranged from the practical tunic you wore on the street, to the stately, Sasanian patterned robe of your host, to the body-hugging costume of the Di and dancer. Each version was adapted for a different context, but they all sprang from the same source, a deep and abiding fascination with the world beyond China's borders. To be fashionable in Chang'an was to embrace that world in every aspect of your life, from the clothes on your back to the entertainment you enjoyed. The morning after the banquet, you wake with the swirling music of the Dian whirl still echoing in your mind. The experience solidified your understanding of hufu as a cultural phenomenon, but you're about to witness it in yet another context, one that combines aristocratic leisure, intense physical activity, and equestrian skill. The polo match. A new acquaintance from the banquet, a young nobleman with a passion for the sport, has invited you to watch a game at a private field on the outskirts of the city. As you approach, you can hear the thundering of hooves and the excited shouts of players and spectators. The field is a vast, grassy expanse, and the game is already in full swing. You climb onto a viewing platform, and the scene before you is breathtaking. This is not a gentle pastime. It's a fast, aggressive, and incredibly skilled sport. Riders on powerful, agile horses charge across the field, leaning far out of their saddles to strike a small wooden ball with long-handled mallets. It's a cavalry charge disguised as a game, a whirlwind of controlled chaos. And every single player, from the highest-ranking prince to the lowest-ranking team member, is dressed in hufu. This is the style's natural habitat. The narrow-sleeved tunics allow for complete freedom of all movement, essential for swinging the mallet. The trousers and sturdy boots provide security and protection in the saddle. The soft futio head wraps they wear are far more practical than a formal, rigid cap, which would surely fall off in the first minute of play. The players are a mix of men and, to your continued astonishment, women. You see a team of court ladies, their horses decked out with colorful ribbons, playing with a ferocity that matches the men's. They are expert riders, maneuvering their mounts with incredible precision. They laugh and shout, their faces flushed with exertion. The image of a woman playing polo, a physically demanding and dangerous sport, is perhaps the most potent symbol of the unique freedoms enjoyed by the Tang elite. The game of polo, or jiu as it was known, was itself an import from Persia or Central Asia, arriving in China sometime in the early Tang. It quickly became an obsession among the aristocracy. The imperial court had its own teams, and murals in royal tombs frequently depict polo matches, cementing their importance in the life of the elite. The funny, little-known anecdote is that emperors sometimes got too into the game. One emperor was famously scolded by his ministers for playing polo because they deemed it too dangerous for the son of heaven. Another story tells of a Tang emperor who, when receiving a group of envoys from the kingdom of Balhae, challenged them to a polo match to settle a diplomatic point. The Tang team, led by a prince, soundly defeated the envoys, which was seen as a demonstration of the empire's cultural and physical superiority. You watch as a player scores a goal, hitting the ball between two posts. The crowd roars its approval. The sport is a perfect distillation of the Tang aristocratic ideal, a blend of martial prowess, athletic grace, and immense wealth. A stable of good polo ponies was astronomically expensive. The hufu clothing is not just an affectation here. It is a uniform, a piece of essential sporting equipment. There is a continuing scholarly discussion about how widespread polo playing actually was. Was it confined to the super elite in the capital, or did it filter down to provincial garrisons and wealthy landowners? While the most lavish games were certainly an imperial pastime, evidence suggests that a simpler form of the game was played by military officers stationed along the frontiers, reinforcing the connection between the sport, horsemanship, and the empire's military culture. Looking at the players, you see the ultimate fusion of form and function. Their clothes are beautiful, made of brightly colored silks, but they are also perfectly engineered for the task at hand. The aesthetics of the hufu style, the sharpness, the dynamism, the sense of readiness, are all on display. The clothing doesn't hinder the action, it enhances it. The game ends, and the players trot their sweating horses off the field. They are laughing, covered in dust and grass stains, but they look magnificent. They are the living embodiment of the hufeng, the barbarian wind that had blown through Tang society. It was just in the clothes they wore or the music they listened to, but in their very bodies, strong, active, and skilled. The polo field, you realize, is a perfect metaphor for the High Tang area itself, the vibrant, competitive, and glamorous arena where the influences of the wider world were embraced and mastered. Your deep dive into Tang fashion has focused on the silhouette, the cut, and the fabric. But as you spend more time in Chang'an, you start noticing the smaller details, the finishing touches that complete the look. One afternoon, while resting in a quiet garden pavilion near a temple, you observe a group of court ladies who have come to offer prayers. They are dressed in elegant hufu, But it's their faces that capture your attention. Their makeup is as stylized and dramatic as their clothing. The look is striking. The faces are powdered a stark white, creating a mask like canvas. The eyebrows are not natural and feathery, but are shaved often then repainted, often in dramatic shapes, arched like a willow leaf or sometimes even triangular, in shades of black or a surprising blue-black indigo. Their lips are painted a bright cherry red, but not the whole lip, just a small flower bud or cherry shape in the very center, making the mouth look small and delicate. But the most exotic elements are painted directly onto the skin. On the temples of several women, you see a small, crescent-shaped smudge of reed, like a tiny comma. This is a ziyang, or slanted reed. The legend behind it is as dramatic as the look itself. One story claims it originated with a palace concubine who accidentally scarred her temple on a screen. The emperor found the scar strangely beautiful, so other court ladies began to imitate it with rouge. Whether this is true or not, it became a key feature of Tang makeup. Between their eyebrows, you see intricate designs painted on. These are huadian, or forehead flowers. They can be simple dots of red or gold, or more complex patterns like tiny flowers, birds, or fish, painted on with pigment or sometimes even applied as tiny, delicate cutouts of gold foil, feathers, or even fish scales. The effect is to add a jeweled, almost magical focal point to the face. As you look closer, you realize that these makeup trends, much like the clothing, bear the hallmarks of foreign influence. While facial decoration has a long history in China, the boldness and specific motifs of the Tang era show a distinct connection to the cultures of the Silk Road. For example, the use of dots and designs on the forehead is reminiscent of the Bendi in India and similar traditions in Central Asia. The exact transmission lines are blurry, but it's clear that as goods and people traveled the Silk Road, ideas about beauty traveled with them. A truly quirky and little-known cosmetic fad from this time was the application of artificial dimples. Women would use a colored paste, often red, to paint small dots on their cheeks to create the illusion of dimples, which were considered charming. It's a testament to the playful and highly artificial nature of Tang beauty standards. The painted eyebrows, the slanted red, the forehead flowers, they all worked in concert with the hufu style. The dramatic, graphic quality of the makeup mirrored the bold, clear lines of the clothing. A face painted in this manner would look out of place with soft, flowing traditional robes, but paired with a short lapel, lead tunic and a towering Uyghur hairstyle. It created a complete, harmonious, and powerfully modern look. There's an ongoing debate among cultural historians about the meaning of this makeup. Was it a tool of female expression, allowing women to creatively adorn themselves? Or was it a restrictive mask, forcing women to conform to a highly artificial and demanding beauty standard set by men? The answer likely varies depending on the individual, but it's undeniable that it was a form of high art, requiring skill, time, and expensive materials like imported pigments and gold foil. The ladies finished their prayers and rise to leave, their movements graceful, their painted faces serene and doll-like. You realize that the transformation into a fashionable Chang'an resident is even more demanding than you thought. It's not enough to change your clothes and your hair. You have to change your very face, turning it into a canvas for the era's cosmopolitan artistry. The barbarian wind didn't just alter silhouettes. It painted itself onto the skin, leaving a colorful, temporary, but unforgettable mark on the faces of the Tang. Your time in Chang'an has been a whirlwind of fashionable sights, from the bustling markets to the elegant banquets. You've become so accustomed to the sight of hufu that it now seems completely normal. But one afternoon, while browsing a bookstore in a quieter, more scholarly ward of the city, you get a glimpse of the other side of the story, the resistance. The bookstore is a serene place, smelling of old paper and ink. It's frequented by older gentlemen, likely retired officials and scholars, who move with a slow, deliberate grace. They are dressed not in the tight-sleeved tunics of the trendy set, but in traditional, wide-sleeved Han robes. Their conversation is muted, but you manage to catch snippets of it as you pretend to examine a scroll. Did you see the procession for the Lantern Festival? One old scholar murmurs to another over a go board. The women of the Wei family, on horseback, dressed like grooms. No sense of propriety. Null. His companion sighs, placing a stone on the board with a soft click. It's this nonsense. This barbarian wind. It blows through the capital and confuses every honest minds. The proper rights are being forgotten. The distinction between man and woman, between Chinese and foreigner. It all becomes a muddy river. This is the voice of the conservative establishment, a perspective you haven't really encountered yet. For these men, steeped in the Confucian classics, the social order was based on a clear set of hierarchies and distinctions. Clothing was a vital part of maintaining that order. Your robes signaled your rank, your gender, your profession, and your cultural identity. The HUFU craze, with its gender-bending styles and foreign origins, was seen as a direct assault on this carefully constructed social grammar. The histories will judge this era harshly. The first scholar continues, his voice raspy with indignation. They will say we lost our way, that we chased after strange smells and loud music and forgot the wisdom of the ancestors. These were not just the grumblings of a few old men. This sentiment was present at the highest levels of government. Throughout the Tang Dynasty, officials known as censors were tasked with upholding moral standards. They would periodically submit memorials to the throne, formal letters of protest, decrying the fashion trends. They wrote about the obscene expense of imported luxuries, the unseemly nature of women wearing trousers, and the danger of blurring the lines between Han and barbarian culture. One of the more amusing and little-known examples of this conservative backlash is a memorial that specifically complained about the length of women's sleeves becoming too short and their necklines too low. The author lamented that these styles were an invitation to impropriety and begged the emperor to issue an edict enforcing more modest attire. These edicts were, in fact, sometimes issued, but they were almost impossible to enforce and were largely ignored by a population caught up in the thrill of the new. The debate over these fashions is a rich field for historians. Some see this conservative reaction as a predictable response from a patriarchal, ethnocentric elite. Others argue that these scholars had a point, that the obsession with foreign trends did, in some ways, coincide with a period of political overreach and eventual instability. The question of whether the barbarian wind was a symptom of cultural vitality or a sign of impending decay is still a matter of interpretation. You continue to browse the shelves, but now you're listening intently. The scholar's conversation turns to poetry, but the underlying theme of cultural purity remains. They praise the poets of earlier, purer dynasties and dismiss the popular new border songs that celebrate the wild landscapes and heroic battles of the frontiers. This encounter is a crucial reminder that no cultural trend, no matter how powerful, is ever universally accepted. The glittering, confident world of HUFU that you've been admiring existed alongside a quieter, more traditional world that viewed it with suspicion and disdain. Chang'an was not a monolith. It was a city of competing ideas, a place where the thrill of the new was in constant, quiet tension with the gravity of the old. Leaving the bookstore, you step back into the sunlit street, where a young woman in a dashing riding outfit trots past on her horse. The contrast is stark. You've just heard the argument against her, the voice of tradition that sees her as a symbol of cultural decline. But in her confident posture and the bold lines of her clothes, you also see the future, or at least the vibrant present of the High Tang. The city's identity was being forged in the space between the scholar's sigh and the horsewoman's stride. The grumblings of the old scholars in the bookstore stick with you. Their argument seems logical from their perspective, but it clashes with one undeniable fact you keep hearing about in whispers and anecdotes. The imperial family themselves were the biggest fans of HUFU. And in a top-down society like the Tang, if the emperor approves, the trend has an unstoppable momentum. You decide to visit a tea house known for its gossip, a place where low-level palace functionaries and servants sometimes mingle with the general public. Here, the talk is all about the goings-on behind the vermilion walls of the Forbidden Palace Park. As you sip your tea, you listen to a man who claims his cousin is a guard in the Daming Palace, the primary imperial residence. You think the ladies on the street are bold, he says to his captivated audience, his voice slow. You should see the imperial princesses. Princess Staping, the emperor's aunt. She practically lives in men's robes. Rode in front of the former emperor once in a full military-style outfit. Purple tunic, jade belt, the works. The emperor just laughed and thought it was charming. This story, or versions of it, is famous. The imperial Li family, who founded the Tang Dynasty, had a significant amount of barbarian blood themselves. They trace their ancestry to the northern frontiers, to the mixed Yuan-Bi, Chinese aristocracy. They were not pure Han Chinese from the old heartlands, and they carried with them a more cosmopolitan, less tradition-bound worldview. They were passionate about horses, hunting, and the vigorous, outdoor lifestyle that HUFU was so perfectly suited for. The reigning emperor, Xuanzong, is a case in point. He is a great patron of the arts, but his passion is for the new, the exotic. The palace is filled with musicians, dancers, and artists from across Asia. His personal stables are legendary, housing thousands of prized horses from Fergana and other western kingdoms. He and his favorite concubine, the legendary young Guifei, are often depicted on horseback, dressed in stylish riding gear. And the emperor's own troop of dancing horses, the guard's cousin, continues. They have them perform on his birthday. Horses that can dance to music hold cups of wine in their mouths. It's a spectacle, and the trainers, older people. The whole aesthetic of the court is tilted to the west. This is a crucial point. The imperial court was just passively accepting foreign culture. It was actively curating and promoting it. This created a powerful feedback loop. The elite saw what was popular at court and rushed to imitate it. This demand then fueled the merchants of the West market to import more foreign goods, music, and styles, which in turn were presented to the court. The emperor's taste acted as a powerful engine driving the entire trend forward. A little known but telling detail is the imperial family's use of foreign-sounding pet names. It was apparently fashionable for princes and princesses to have Turkic or Sogdi nicknames, a practice that would have horrified the conservative Confucian officials. It was another small sign of their personal identification with the cultures of the North and West. Of course, the emperor's endorsement of HUFU creates a puzzle for historians. How do we reconcile this with the official edicts that sometimes tried to curb the trend? The most likely answer is that these edicts were a concession to the conservative faction at court. The emperor would formally agree that tradition should be upheld, and an edict would be issued. But in practice, no one, least of all the emperor himself, had any intention of following it. It was a political maneuver, a way to appease the old guard while allowing the vibrant new culture to flourish. This official disapproval versus actual practice is a key theme in understanding Tang society. The conversation in the tea house turns to the heir apparent. The crown prince, hey, she's just as bad. Someone else chimes in, spends all his time playing polo with his personal guard, all of them dressed like Turkic cavalrymen. It becomes clear that the barbarian wind isn't just a fad blowing through the streets. It's a storm blowing from the very pinnacle of power. The conservative scholars can write their angry poems and their moralizing memorials, but they are fighting a losing battle. They are arguing against the personal taste and cultural heritage of the ruling family itself. The fashion for HUFU was a rebellion against the establishment. In many ways, it was the establishment. As you leave the tea house, you have a newfound appreciation for the power of imperial patronage, the entire ecosystem of Tang fashion, the Sogdi and answers, the Persian textiles, the noble women in trousers, is all flourishing under the protective umbrella of the emperor's personal taste. The trend is not just about looking foreign. It's about looking powerful, modern, and, above all, loyal to the aesthetic of the ruling house. You've seen the raw materials in the West market and the finished products on the streets. You've understood the demand, from the common folk right up to the emperor. Now, You're curious about the people who bridge that gap. The tailors. How did they, the skilled artisans of Chang'an, adapt their traditional techniques to create these new, foreign-style garments? You seek out a master tailor's workshop, not one of the simple storefronts, but a more established business known for serving the city's wealthy families. The workshop is a hive of quiet, focused activity. In the front is a reception area where clients are measured and consult on fabrics. In the back, apprentices are busy cutting patterns, sewing seams, and adding delicate embroidery. You manage to get a few moments with the master tailor himself, an older man with sharp eyes and hands that move with a lifetime of practice. You ask him how he learned to make these new HUFU styles that were so different from the clothes he must have grown up with. He smiles, a little wistfully. You don't learn, he says, snipping a thread with a tiny pair of scissors. You adapt. You watch. You take things apart. He explains that when the first foreign garments began to appear in the city, worn by merchants and envoys, tailors like him were fascinated. A Sojidi merchant came to me once. His robe was worn out from his journey. He wanted me to make him a new one, using our fine Chinese silk, but in his own style. I spent a day just studying the old garment, the way the shoulder was cut, the way the collar was set. It was a different geometry of clothing. This is the heart of the matter. Chinese robes were traditionally made from rectangular pieces of cloth, with very little cutting and shaping, which resulted in the wide, flowing silhouette. HUFU, on the other hand, involved more complex, shaped pattern pieces, what we would now call tailored construction. It required a different way of thinking about how fabric relates to the body. The sleeves were the first challenge. The tailor recalls, our looms produce wide bolts of silk, making our traditional wide sleeves is very efficient, very little waste. But for these narrow sleeves, you have to cut the fabric on a curve. You have to shape it. It wastes more silk. But, he shrugs, it's what the customers want. It's the look. He shows you a paper pattern laid out on a large table. It's for a woman's riding jacket. You can see the curved lines for the armholes and the shaped pieces for the lapels. This fusion of Central Asian design with Chinese craftsmanship created a unique product. The tailors of Chang'an were not just blindly copying foreign clothes. They were reinterpreting them, using their own superior materials and techniques. They might take a Persian-style collar, combine it with a Turkic-style belt, and craft the whole thing from the world's finest Sichuan brocade. The result was a garment that was recognizably Hu in style, but unmistakably Tang in its quality and refinement. A little-known fact about Tang-era sewing is the incredible fineness of the stitches. Archaeological finds have revealed silk garments with stitching so tiny and precise that it's difficult to replicate even with modern machines. These tailors were masters of their craft, and they applied this meticulous skill to the new, foreign patterns. The biggest change, the tailor says, pausing his work, is that we now have to think about the body underneath. Before, the robe created the shape. It was a piece of architecture. Now, the clothes follow the shape of the person. It's a different philosophy. This is a profound observation, getting to the very core of the aesthetic shift. This process of adaptation and fusion is a topic of great interest to fashion historians. They debate the role of immigrant artisans, whether Sojidi or Persian tailors working in Chang'an and teaching their methods to local craftsmen. The evidence is circumstantial but strong. The West market was home to large foreign communities, and it's almost certain that their skills were part of the city's craft ecosystem. The master tailor in front of you might have learned it not just by deconstructing a garment, but by having a conversation with a foreign colleague over a cup of tea. He picks up a finished tunic, ready for delivery. It's made of a deep blue silk, with subtle embroidery along the cuffs and collar. We take their ideas, he says, folding the garment carefully, and we make them better. We make them ours. In his words, you hear the quiet confidence of the Tang artisan. He is not threatened by the foreign styles. He sees them as a challenge, a new set of ideas to play with. His workshop is a laboratory where cultural exchange happens in the most practical way possible, with needle, thread, and silk. The tailors of Chang'an were the unsung heroes of the hufu trend, the skilled hands that turned a foreign fad into a domestic art form, stitching together the cosmopolitan identity of the Tang Dynasty one perfectly executed seam at a time. You've spent most of your time in Chang'an observing the city's elite, the nobles, the wealthy merchants, the high-ranking officials. It's easy to get the impression that the hufu craze was exclusively their domain. After all, who else could afford imported textiles and bespoke tailoring? But today, you decide to wander into the less glamorous parts of the city, the wards inhabited by artisans, laborers, and the working poor, to see if the barbarian wind has reached them. The streets here are narrower and more crowded. The buildings are made of packed earth and wood, not the grand brick and stone of the aristocratic quarters, but the energy is just as palpable. Here, you will see the city at work. Porters carry heavy loads, blacksmiths hammer at their forges, and food vendors hawk their wares on every corner. At first glance, the hufu trend seems absent. Most people are wearing simple, practical clothing made of coarse hemp or cotton, in muted shades of brown and gray. Their garments are designed for labor, not for show. But as you look closer, you start to see the subtle traces. You notice a man pushing a handcart. His tunic is old and patched, but the collar has been crudely cut and folded back to mimic the open lapels of a fashionable hufu robe. It's a small, telling detail. He can't afford a new garment, but he can alter his old one to participate, in some small way, in the dominant style of the era. Further down the street, you see a group of construction workers taking a break. They are wearing short tunics and trousers, not out of fashion, but for sheer practicality. Their clothing has always been closer in form to hufu than the robes of the scholars. But you notice one of them has a brightly colored sash tied around his waist, a small splash of color that echoes the elaborate belts of the wealthy. Even the women, many of whom are busy with washing or selling vegetables, show signs of the trend. You see a woman whose hair is pulled up in a high, functional knot that is a simplified, workaday version of the dramatic Uyghur style buns you saw on the court ladies. It's fashion adapted to reality. This is the trickle-down effect of a powerful trend. The common people may not have had the resources to fully embrace the hufu lifestyle, but they were clearly aware of it and incorporated elements of it as best they could. This might be a slightly more fitted sleeve, a different way of tying a belt, or a simple piece of colored thread braided into the hair. These small choices were their way of feeling connected to the glamorous world of the capital. A little-known aspect of Tang society that facilitated this was the proliferation of style manuals of a sort. While literacy was not widespread, woodblock prints depicting popular figures, deities, or scenes from stories were common. These prints would often show people in the latest fashions, providing a visual guide that even the illiterate could understand and aspire to. A simple print could transmit a new hairstyle or the cut of a sleeve across the social spectrum. The question of how deeply hufu penetrated the lower classes is a subject of academic debate. Some historians argue that the material cost would have made it prohibitive for most, and that what we see are merely superficial imitations. Others contend that the influence was more profound, representing a genuine shift in aesthetics that touched everyone, even if they could only express it in small ways. The truth is likely that while a full hufu outfit was a status symbol, the spirit of hufu, its practicality and dynamism, resonated with people from all walks of life. You stop at a stall selling cheap ceramic bowls. The potter, a man with clay-stained hands, is wearing a simple apron, but pinned to his tunic is a small, tin badge, stamped with a design that looks like a crude imitation of a Sasanian-style bird. It's his humble version of the expensive silver and jade plaques worn by officials on their belts. It's his hufu dream, expressed in the materials he can afford. This, you realize, is where the fashion trend becomes a true cultural phenomenon. It's one thing for the rich to adopt a new style. It's another entirely for their aspirations to be reflected in the small, personal choices of the working class. The potter with his tin badge and the cart pusher with his folded back collar are just as much a part of the story as the princess on her polo pony. They demonstrate that the barbarian wind was more than just a breeze that skimmed the rooftops of the wealthy. It was a current that flowed through every street and alleyway of the great city. Your exploration of Chang'an as living fashion has been thorough. You've seen it on the rich and the poor, at work and at play. No, you find yourself drawn to the way the city records itself, to the artifacts that will one day tell this story to the future. You wander into a district known for its kilns and potteries, where craftsmen create the goods that will furnish the homes and tombs of the city's inhabitants. In the window of one of the larger shops, you see them, a set of freshly fired ceramic figurines, known as Yang. They are magnificent. It's a miniature procession, a snapshot of Tang life rendered in clay. There is a proud, striding camel, its back laden with silk bundles. There's a statuesque court lady with an elaborate hairstyle. And there are musicians, a whole troop of them, mounted on horseback. You step inside the shop for a closer look. The owner, proud of his latest creations, brings one of the equestrian musicians over for you to inspect. The figurine is about a foot tall, exquisitely detailed, and painted in the vibrant three-color Sankai glaze of green, amber, and cream that is the hallmark of Tang pottery. The musician is a man with distinctly non-Han features, a prominent nose, deep-set eyes, and a full beard. He is wearing a pointed cap and a tight-sleeved tunic. He holds a pipa, a pear-shaped lute that was itself a Silk Road import, and his mouth is open as if in song. This is it. This is the hufu, the barbarian wind, immortalized in earthenware. These figurines were not just decorations. They were an essential part of funerary rites. Wealthy families would commission entire sets of them to be placed in their tombs, believing that these ceramic servants, animals, and entertainers would continue to serve them in the afterlife. Because of this practice, the tombs of the Tang elite have become incredible time capsules of their daily life and aesthetic preferences. You look at the other figurines on the set. There's a female dancer, her body frozen in a dynamic pose, her long sleeves trailing behind her. A clear depiction of a popular court dance. There's a civil official, recognizable by his formal hat and solemn expression. And there's a pair of fierce-looking tomb guardians, supernatural beings meant to protect the deceased. But the foreign musicians and merchants are always a prominent part of the ensemble. A particularly charming and little-known type of figurine from this period is the foreign wine cellar. These are often depicted as pot-bellied men with curly hair and exaggerated features, holding a wineskin. They represent the vendors of the exotic grape wine from the West and were a symbol of the luxurious, cosmopolitan lifestyle the tomb's occupant wished to enjoy in the next world. The shop owner points out the details on the camel figurine. We even get the knots on the ropes right, he says with pride. The desire for realism was paramount. These figurines are so detailed that historians and archaeologists use them as primary sources for understanding everything from what kind of saddles were used to how a woman's hair was pinned. They are, in a very real sense, a 3D catalog of Tang material culture. The academic world has spent countless hours studying these figurines. Debates rage on about the exact symbolism of certain figures. Is the bearded musician a specific ethnicity? A Sochi-Dian, a Tuchorian, a Persian? Sometimes the features are clear enough to make a good guess, but often they are a generic, stylized representation of foreigner. This itself is telling. For the patrons buying these figurines, the specific origin was less important than the general air of exoticity they conveyed. As you thank the shop owner and leave, you realize the profound significance of what you've just seen. The fashion for HUFU was so central to the Tang identity that people wanted to take it with them into eternity. They wanted their afterlife to be just as vibrant, as musical, and as cosmopolitan as their time in Chang'an. The clothes they wore were ephemeral, destined to decay, but these ceramic figures, buried deep in the earth, would survive. They are the silent, smiling witnesses to the barbarian wind. Their painted on tunics and forearm faces are a permanent testament to a time when China fell in love with the world. You've become so immersed in the bold, open, and often revealing aspects of hufu fashion. The trousers for women, the tight-fitting tunics, the bared necks, that you started to think of the era as one of uncomplicated liberation. But one day, you see a sight that introduces a note of complexity, a seeming contradiction to the narrative of openness you've been building. A wealthy-looking woman is stepping out of a curtained carriage. She is accompanied by several female servants, but instead of the chic Weimar hat with its flirtatious, translucent veil, this woman is wearing something far more extreme. It's a piece of headwear that is essentially a cape, attached to a wide-brimmed hat that falls all the way to her feet. It covers her entire body, obscuring her form and her clothing completely. She is a walking tent, a moving column of fabric. This is the Millie, the full-body veil you heard about. Seeing it in person is jarring, in a city where other women are riding astride horses in men's clothing. This garment seems to belong to a different world, a different ideology. It is a statement of extreme modesty, a tool of complete concealment. How can these two realities, the woman in trousers and the woman in the full-body veil, exist at the same time, on the same street? The Millie has a fascinating history. It actually originated as a practical garment for the nomadic peoples of the northern and western frontiers, a way to protect oneself from the harsh wind and sand of the steppes and deserts. It was originally gender-neutral. However, when it was introduced to China, it was adopted almost exclusively by women, and its meaning shifted from practical protection to social seclusion. In the early Tang, it was considered the height of propriety for aristocratic women to wear the Millie when they ventured out of doors. It was a way for them to move through the public sphere without being seen, a portable form of the cloistered dinner quarters where they were expected to spend most of their lives. So what you are witnessing is not a new trend, but an old one, a remnant of a more conservative time. The woman in the Millie is likely from an older, more traditional family, one that has not embraced the new, more liberal fashions of the High Tang. Her choice of headwear is a deliberate statement, a rejection of the hufu and its perceived laxity. A quirky detail that historians have pieced together is that there was a clear, documented evolution in this type of headwear. The story goes like this. First, there was the all-concealing Millie. Then, as society became more open, it was gradually replaced by the Weimar, the hat with the shorter, shoulder-length veil that revealed the woman's figure and allowed for more interaction. Eventually, in the most liberal periods, many women abandoned the veil altogether, riding in public with their faces completely uncovered. The changing length of the veil becomes a kind of barometer for female freedom in the Tang Dynasty. The presence of the Millie on the streets of Chang'an is a source of ongoing discussion among scholars. Its existence alongside the revealing hufu styles complicates any simple narrative of Tang liberation. It suggests that society was not uniform. Different families, and different individuals, had vastly different ideas about propriety and a woman's place in the world. Chang'an was a city of contradictions, where a woman in a full-body veil could pass a woman in men's trousers on the street. As the woman in the Millie glides towards a nearby temple, a ghost from a more restrictive past, you're struck by the complexity of it all. Fashion is never simple. It's a conversation, an argument, a battlefield of ideas. The Millie and the polo outfit are two opposing points in that conversation. One speaks of seclusion and the preservation of tradition, the other of freedom and the embrace of the new. This moment reminds you that history is not a neat progression from one stage to the next. It's messy. Old and new ideas coexist, clashing and mingling in surprising ways. The story of Tang fashion is not just the story of the barbarian wind, but also the story of the cultural obstacles and traditionalist walls it had to blow against. The woman in the Millie is a silent but powerful testament to the fact that even in the most open and cosmopolitan city in the world, the forces of conservatism were still very much present. You've been in China for what feels like a lifetime. You've acclimatized to its rhythms, its fashions, its vibrant, outward-looking spirit. The city feels eternal, a golden age destined to last forever. But no golden age ever does. The year is now 755, and a shadow is falling over the empire, a shadow that will ultimately change everything, right down to the clothes on people's backs. The news arrives like a tremor, first in scattered rumors, then in panicked official reports. A general named Lushan, a man of Sogdi and un-Turkic descent who had been a favorite of the court, has rebelled. With a massive army, he is marching south from the northeastern frontier, heading for the heart of the empire. At first, the city doesn't seem to believe it. How could a barbarian general, who had been showered with imperial favor, turn against the Son of Heaven? But as the weeks pass, the news grows worse, and Lushan's forces are sweeping aside the imperial armies. The capital, once so secure, now feels vulnerable. The atmosphere in Chang'an changes. The carefree confidence begins to curdle into fear and suspicion. The very things that were once celebrated, the foreign music, the exotic goods, the barbarian fashions, are now viewed with a new, weary eye. The rebellion is being led by a man who embodies the Hu culture that the elite had so enthusiastically embraced. This creates a profound and painful cognitive dissonance. You walk through the West Market, and the energy is gone. The boisterous Sogdi and merchants are now quiet, their faces etched with worry. They are suddenly suspect, their loyalty questioned simply because they share an ethnic background with the rebel leader. The easy mingling of cultures that define the city starts to break down. A wall of mistrust is rising. The fashion on the street begins to change, slowly at first, then more rapidly. You see fewer people dressed in the most flamboyant HUFU. The tight-sleeved tunics and foreign-style caps start to disappear, replaced by more subdued, traditional Chinese clothing. It's a subconscious but powerful reaction. To look to barbarian is suddenly unwise. It feels disloyal. This turning point, the Lushan Rebellion, is a major focus for historians of the Tang. They debate its long-term cultural impact. Did it truly cause a wave of xenophobia that ended the Tang's cosmopolitan golden age, or was the decline more gradual? The consensus is that the rebellion was a cataclysmic event that acted as a powerful catalyst, accelerating a cultural shift that may have already been underway. The empire's confidence was shattered, and with it, its uncritical love for all things foreign. A little-known but poignant detail from this period comes from the poet Du Fu, who lived through the rebellion. He wrote poems describing the devastation of Chang'an after it was captured by the rebels. He speaks of a city in ruins, its music silenced, its people scattered. His work provides a heartbreaking, first-hand account of the end of an era. The imperial court is forced to flee the capital. The emperor, Xuanzang, the great patron of Wufeng, endures the ultimate humiliation. His own guards, blaming the rebellion on his obsession with Yang Guifei and her protégé in Lushan, force him to have his beloved concubine killed on the road. It's a brutal, tragic end to the love story that had defined the High Tang. As the rebellion rages on for years, a deep-seated resentment against foreigners and foreign influence takes root. The barbarian wind no longer feels like a refreshing breeze. It feels like a destructive gale. When the Tang court eventually recaptures Chang'an, it is a different city. The trauma of the rebellion has left a permanent scar. The carefree openness is gone, replaced by a more insular, conservative, and defensive mindset. You walk the streets of this changed city. The vibrant colors seem to have faded. The bold fashions have retreated. People are wary. The love affair with the outside world is over. It ended in betrayal and bloodshed. The wardrobe of an entire generation is about to be put away. A relic of a happier, more confident time that now feels impossibly distant. The years pass. The Lushan Rebellion, though eventually crushed, has irrevocably altered the soul of the dynasty. The Tang survives, but its golden confidence is gone, replaced by a more cautious and introspective mood. You are now in the era known as the Middle Tang, and the changes are visible everywhere. especially in the mirror of fashion. You walk down the same vermilion bird avenue that once so dazzled you with its parade of exotic hufu. The street is still grand, the city is still populous, but the sartorial landscape is transformed. The narrow sleeves, the lapel-led collars, the trousers on women, they have all but vanished. In their place, a new style has emerged, one that speaks of a profound cultural shift. The women you see are no longer dressed for the polo field or the saddle. They are dressed for the palace hall in the garden pavilion. They wear magnificent, flowing gowns known as Qizhong Rukyu Yuan, the same style that had been worn for formal occasions in the past, but has now become the dominant fashion for elite women. The silhouette is the complete opposite of hufu. It's voluminous, layered, and designed to conceal the body, not reveal it. A long-sleeved blouse is topped by a skirt tied high above the bust, just under the armpits, creating a dramatic, high-waisted look. The sleeves are no longer narrow and practical. They have become immense, flowing swaths of fabric that fall almost to the floor, often trailing behind the wearer as she walks. They are beautiful, but they are also incredibly restrictive. A woman in these robes could not possibly ride a horse or engage in any kind of strenuous activity. Her movements are, by necessity, slow, graceful, and contained. Over the gown, women wear a long, sheer scarf or shawl called a pibo. This is draped artfully over the shoulders and arms, adding another layer of fabric and complexity to the outfit. The whole ensemble is a celebration of textiles, a way to display wealth through the sheer yardage of fine silk one was wearing. This return to a more traditionally Chinese style of dress is a direct reaction against the foreign-influenced fashions of the pre-rebellion era. After the trauma of the An Lushan Rebellion, there was a conscious cultural movement to reassert native traditions and reject the barbarian influences that were now associated with disloyalty and chaos. It was a sartorial retreat, a turning inward. A curious and little-known aspect of these new, wide-sleeved gowns is that they created a secondary market for sleeve weights. These were small, decorative metal weights that could be sewn into the hems of the long sleeves to make them hang more gracefully and not fly about in an unseemly manner. It's a small detail that speaks to the highly managed and artificial nature of the new aesthetic. Historians continue to analyze the reasons for this dramatic shift. Was it purely a political reaction, a form of sartorial nationalism, or were there other factors at play? Some argue that the decline of the equestrian culture as the empire lost control of the horse-breeding regions in the northwest also played a role. Others suggest it reflects a change in the idealized form of female beauty, from the healthy, active woman of the high Tang to a more delicate, graceful, and opulent ideal in the middle and late Tang. You pause to look at a mural painted on a temple wall, a new one depicting ladies of the court. Their faces are different too. The makeup is still elaborate, but fuller, rounder faces are now considered the ideal of beauty. The eyebrows are painted in mournful, drooping shapes. The overall feeling is one of awe instinct with a certain melancholy. This is not to say that the new fashion is not beautiful. In its own way, it is stunning. The rich fabrics, the graceful lines, the sheer theatricality of the trailing sleeves. It's a powerful statement of wealth and status, but it's a different kind of power. It's not the power of action and freedom, but the power of display and containment. The fashion no longer says, I can ride a horse and see the world. It says, I am a precious object, a beautiful flower in a sheltered garden. The wardrobe of the Tang woman has become a gilded cage. As you continue to observe the fashion of the later Tang Dynasty, you start to notice that the barbarian wind has died out completely. It's more like a river that has gone underground. Its influence still felt in subtle, almost invisible ways. The overt, head-to-toe hufu look is gone, a relic of a bygone era, but its DNA has been absorbed into the mainstream of Tang clothing, creating a new synthesis. You're at a gathering of literary men, a poetry party in a garden. The scholars are all wearing the traditional-looking wide-sleeved robes, but you look closely at the robe of one younger, more fashion-conscious poet. While his sleeves are wide, His collar is not the simple crossover style of ancient Han clothing. It's a modified round collar, a direct descendant of the Yuan Ling Pao that was popularized as part of the HUFU ensemble. The sharp, practical garment of the horseman has been softened, widened, and absorbed into the formal wear of a scholar. This is the process of fusion. A foreign element is introduced. It becomes a popular trend, and then, as the trend fades, the most useful or appealing parts of it are incorporated into the existing traditional forms. The barbarian element is tamed, Sinoisiized, and made a permanent part of the Chinese wardrobe. You see it in women's clothing as well. A lady might be wearing the full, flowing Tizhong Rukyu Yuan gown, the epitome of the new conservative aesthetic. But the fabric of her dress might be a silk brocade woven with a highly stylized floral medallion pattern that is, if you trace its artistic lineage back far enough, a softened and abstracted version of the old Sasanian pearl roundels. The fierce Persian lions have been replaced by gentle peonies, but the geometric, symmetrical layout remains. The foreign influence is still there, but it has been translated into a new, more Chinese visual language. Even boots, the most practical element of HUFU, did not disappear entirely. While they were no longer the everyday footwear of fashionable women, they were retained for military uniforms and for the service clothing of guards and attendants. Their practicality was too obvious to be abandoned completely. A little-known example of this fusion can be found in a type of informal jacket that became popular in the late Tang. It had moderately wide sleeves but fastened down the front with buttons or ties, a feature more common in Central Asian garments than in traditional Chinese robes, which typically used a sash. This hybrid garment offered a compromise between traditional aesthetics and practical convenience. The academic debate here is fascinating. When does a foreign style cease to be foreign? At what point does an imported element become so thoroughly integrated that it is considered native? This process of cultural assimilation is complex and often political. In the later Tang, there was a conscious effort by some to purify Chinese culture, to identify and expunge foreign influences. But in the realm of material culture, this was almost impossible. The threads had become too tightly interwoven. You reflect on the journey of HUFU. It arrived as a bold, coherent style, a complete package of foreignness. For a time, it dominated the cultural landscape. Then, in the wake of political trauma, it was rejected. But it didn't truly vanish. It simply dissolved, its component parts seeping into the broader culture. The lapel lead collar, the use of trousers as an undergarment, the concept of a tailored fit, the love for certain geometric patterns, all these things lingered, becoming part of the toolkit of Chinese designers and artisans. The barbarian wind had died down, but it had permanently changed the climate. It had enriched the vocabulary of Chinese fashion, providing new silhouettes, new techniques, and new ideas. The story of HUFU was not one of a fad that came and went, but of a powerful catalyst that was absorbed into the cultural bloodstream of the Tang. It's a reminder that culture is not a static thing, but a living, breathing organism that constantly consumes, digests, and drives, turning the foreign into the familiar, and the exotic into the everyday. The seasons have turned many times. The vibrant, chaotic energy of your youth in Chang'an has settled into the quiet, stately rhythm of middle age. The city is still grand, but its spirit is more subdued, or weighed down by memory. One quiet afternoon, you find yourself sorting through a large camphor-wood chest where you keep your old clothes, the ones defined to discard but no longer in style. Your hands brush past the heavy silks of the current fashion, the gowns with their voluminous, floor-sweeping sleeves and high waistlines. They are beautiful, opulent, but they feel heavy, burdensome. They are the clothes of a more cautious world. And then, at the very bottom of the chest, your fingers touch something different. The fabric is lighter, the texture simpler. You pull it out. It's the blue tunic, the one you bought all those years ago, on one of your first days in the city. Your HUFU tunic. You hold it up in the soft afternoon light filtering through the window. It looks so small, so spare compared to the garments of today. The sleeves are narrow, practical. The collar is the simple, open the pale lead style. It seems almost naive in its functionality. Holding it, a ghost of a feeling returns to you, the memory of lightness, of freedom. You remember the exhilarating sensation of being able to swing your arms freely, unencumbered by yards of flowing silk. This single garment is a key, and it unlocks a flood of memories from that other, lost era. Suddenly, you are back on the streets of the High Tang. You see the confident stride of the women in their trousers and boots. You hear the boisterous, multilingual chatter of the West Market. You smell the exotic spices and the scent of horses. You remember the thrill of the Sojidi the dancer or spinning top of color and energy. You hear the thundering hooves and the crack of the mallet on the polo field. It was a time of immense, unshakable confidence. A time when the empire was so sure of itself that it could embrace the entire world and wear it like a favorite coat. This tunic was the uniform of that confidence, but after the An Lushan rebellion, it became a symbol of something else, a painful reminder of a trust that had been broken. The style, so closely associated with the barbarian general who had betrayed the throne, became politically and socially toxic. A little known, sad footnote to this period is that many families, in the wave of anti-foreign sentiment that followed the rebellion, quietly destroyed their most extravagant hufu garments. Expensive Persian-style robes were unpicked for their thread, or simply burned, lest they attract suspicion or be seen as a sign of lingering sympathy for the rebels. To own and display such an item was to risk being seen as an outcast. You fold the tunic carefully. It feels fragile now, not just in its fabric, but in what it represents. How quickly it all changed. Historians will likely debate this for centuries. How fast did the fashion really turn? Was it an overnight rejection, a collective decision to turn one's back on a painful memory? Or was it a more gradual fading, as a generation grew old and their children simply chose the new, more sober styles, leaving the old hufu to gather dust in chests like this one? From your own memory, it felt fast. It felt like a door slamming shut. One season, the streets were a riot of foreign-inspired color and energy. The next, it was as if a chill wind had blown through, leaving behind a more somber and uniform landscape. You place the tunic back in the chest, laying a piece of protective paper over it. It is more than just an old piece of clothing. It's a relic of a different time, a different state of mind. It's a memory of a Chang'an that was open, daring, and fearless. It was the feeling of a world that believed itself to be at the beginning of something. Not, as it turned out, nearing the end. You close the heavy lid of the camphor wood chest. The click of the latch sounds unnaturally loud in the quiet room. The ghost of the past has been put away, but its presence lingers in the air. The sun is beginning to dip low in the sky, painting the paper windows of your study with a warm, golden, orange light. You feel a sudden urge to see it. The sunset, not from a courtyard, but from a place that offers a true perspective. You decide to walk to the city wall. As you step outside, the evening air is cool. The Chang'an you walk through now is a city of ghosts and echoes. The grand avenues are still here. The ward walls still stand, but the vibrant, chaotic energy you remember from your youth has been replaced by a more deliberate, almost weary, sense of order. You pass a group of young officials leaving their posts for the day. They are dressed in the proper, wide-sleeved robes of the era, their conversation polite and subdued. To them, the stories you carry in your head, of women in trousers playing polo, of court-sponsored Sojidi and dance troops, would sound like fables from a decadent, almost mythical past. They are the children of a changed empire, one that looks inward, not outward. You reach the city wall, a colossal structure of packed earth and stone, and make your way up one of the long ramps. At the top, the view is, as it has always been, staggering. The entire city is laid out before you, a perfect grid of streets and wards, now bathed in the spectacular, melancholy light of the setting sun. The tiled roofs of the palaces and temples glow like embers. This is the sunset glow, the hufu, beautiful and tinged with the sadness of an ending. From this vantage point, you can feel the sweep of history. The Tang Dynasty did not fall after the Lushan rebellion. It survived, but it was a dynasty haunted by its own past, constantly struggling with powerful regional military governors who defied central authority, and plagued by a slow economic decline. The confident, expansionist power you knew was gone, replaced by a vast empire trying desperately to hold itself together. Historians will argue for 1,000 years about the ultimate cause of its final collapse, which still lies in the future. Was the rebellion a mortal wound, or was it just a symptom of a deeper sickness? A death by 1,000 cuts from political and economic maladies that had been growing for decades. Looking out over the vast, tired city, you feel that no single answer could ever be enough. Your eyes drift down to a nearby courtyard of a wealthy home. A man is sitting, reading a scroll. He is not sitting on a low mat, as was the custom in your youth for most occasions. He is sitting on a high-backed wooden chair. And you remember when that kind of elevated seating was a foreign curiosity. A hucheng, a barbarian couch or folding stool, brought by travelers and monks who weren't used to sitting on the floor. It was an exotic import, just like the tight-sleeved tunics and the Persian melodies. But look at it now. It's just a chair. No one calls it a hucheng anymore. Its foreign origins have been completely forgotten. It has been so thoroughly absorbed into daily life, so utterly normalized, that it has become invisible. It's no longer a statement, just a piece of furniture, and in that quiet observation, you find an answer to the question that has been lingering in your mind since you closed the chest. What remains? What is the ultimate legacy of the barbarian wind that once blew so fiercely through these streets? It isn't the flamboyant clothes or the shocking trends. Those were the loud, crashing waves of the tide. They came in, they reshaped the landscape for a time, and then they receded. What remains is the quiet, almost imperceptible change in the shoreline. The chair, the round collar, now part of a scholar's robe. The lute, now considered a traditional Chinese instrument. The most useful, the most practical, the most beautiful ideas don't vanish. They simply sink into the culture and become part of its fabric, their exotic origins fading like the memory of a dream. The last sliver of the sun disappears below the western hills. The great bell of a monastery tolls the evening hour. The tide of fashion has gone out, and the tide of the dynasty is going out with it. But something was left behind on the sand. You witnessed its arrival, its glorious peak, and its quiet retreat, and you understand that this is the way of things. The story is over, but the echo remains, woven into the very fabric of the world. The last toll of the monastery bell fades into the vast, quiet expanse of the evening. The memory of the city, of the silks and the horses and the faces in the crowd, begins to soften. You can feel it too, can't you? That feeling of a story settling into its final place. The sharp edges of the day are blurring, and the world outside your window is now just a gentle, distant hum. The city of Chang'an is no longer a place you are visiting. It has become a landscape within your own mind, a peaceful, sprawling map where you can wander. The scent of sandalwood from a long-ago shop, the shimmer of a silk robe, the taste of a foreign wine. They are all just soft, pleasant thoughts now, drifting by like clouds in a moonlit sky. Let them drift. There is no need to hold on to them. Your breathing is slow and even, a quiet rhythm in the stillness of your room. Each breath is a gentle wave, washing away the day, leaving behind only calm. You are warm, and you are comfortable. The journey is complete, and you are already at the edge of a dream. Let the last thoughts dissolve into the soft darkness. There is only rest now.